During the mid to late 90s, many games started to enter the third dimension. However, one series that had a weird absence from this trend was Metroid. Super Metroid was released on the SNES in 1994 and revolutionized the Metroid formula. Then the N64 came out, which was a console that made it easy for developers to make 3D games with the use of its 64-bit operating system. Despite this, no 3D Metroid game was released throughout the whole of the N64's lifespan. That remained the same until 2002, after the Nintendo GameCube came out, when Retro Studios released Metroid Prime. With the fourth game in the soon-to-be quadrilogy looking to finally come out this year, I decided to take a look back at where this all started. At the very start of the game, you are brought to the space pirate frigate where these space pirates are doing dangerous experiments, as you can tell by the way this place looks. This area acts as a tutorial for the game, teaching the player the controls. You start with a few items, including but not limited to the missiles, mothball, and scan visor. One of the creatures the space pirates were experimenting with was the Parasite Queen, which is the first boss fight. I like how this fight is designed as an introduction to the game. A big part of Metroid Prime games is using the scan visor to find an enemy's weak point. These games don't really function like typical first-person shooters where aiming and shooting are the main gameplay mechanics. In these games, you get a target on the enemies. The challenge about this is trying to find an enemy's weak point and exploiting that weakness whilst dodging their attacks. In this boss fight, the weakness is her mouth, but the targeting reticle does not target her mouth until you scan her to find out about the weakness. This is just perfect for teaching the player how enemy encounters will work for the rest of the game. After you defeat her, she crashes into the reactor core of the space pirate frigate, and Samus is now forced into an escape sequence as the frigate is about to explode. Whilst trying to escape, Samus sees Ridley, who has been experimented on by the space pirates, and is now an even more powerful version of the Ridley seen in Metroid 1, known as Meta Ridley. At some point in the sequence, Samus is hit by an explosion, and just like pretty much every other Metroid game, she becomes limited to the most basic of her abilities. At the end of the sequence, Meta Ridley escapes to the planet Talon 4, and Samus follows on a ship. This is where the main gameplay of Metroid Prime starts. In Talon 4, you must explore the surrounding areas to get new upgrades and weapons until you are able to get 12 Chozo artifacts and get into the Impact Crater. These areas are the Chozo Ruins, Magmor Caverns, Sandrana Drifts, Base on Mines, and of course the area you start at being the Talon Overworld. Of course, just like most other Metroid games, Prime's main gameplay loop requires you to find an area locked behind an item requirement, find the item, use the item to access previously inaccessible area, repeat. So when you start the game, you'll stumble upon the Chozo Ruins, where you see this locked door, and you'll have to explore to find the missiles to open the locked door. An important part of Metroidvania games is designing the game so that the player can easily progress through the game, but will also get stuck and will have to explore to find where to go. In this regard, Metroid Prime does a whole lot of things right, but at the same time does quite a lot wrong. Let me start by showing what it does right. When you get an item in this game, you are often taught how to use the item right after obtaining it. For example, when you get the Spider Ball after beating Thardus, you must use it to leave the area. This helps the player look out for areas like this, as when you see these Spider Ball tracks, you can associate them with the Spider Ball, as you were shown that the tracks work like this. And this isn't just limited to the Spider Ball, many other items do this. Metroid Prime also has a hinting system. Now this might be annoying for fans of Metroidvania games who would rather get lost and explore by themselves, however this hinting system can be turned off in the menu. This can help the player find locations, but it also isn't an easy way to cheat the game and rob yourself of the experience of finding secrets and doing things on your own. A lot of hints can't show you exactly where to go, as they pop up before you've even received the map for the area, and so you'll just have to go in the general direction of where the hint is telling you to go. Speaking of the map, I think it is pretty good in this game, as it easily shows where the player has and has not explored. Blue means unexplored room, and orange means explored room. On top of this, the map is also 3D, letting you have a perspective of what every room looks like, and it also shows elevators, save points, and ammo stations. The areas themselves most of the time do a good job of making the player remember where blocked off areas are. Each of the 5 main areas are very distinct from one another. There is no confusing the lush green rainforest of the Talon overworld with the snowy landscapes of the Phendrana Drifts. If you find an inaccessible area in the Chozo ruins, for example, it would be easy to remember that it was in the ruins, as the ruins look completely different from other areas. A lot of these blocked off areas are memorable because of 2 reasons. Firstly, the scan visor can identify and tell you what things are made of, or what they are. So if you are told that a blocked off area is made of Bendesium, then you can easily draw the dots and come back here when you get the power bombs that can break Bendesium. Secondly, if you find an area without the required ability, you may start trying different abilities in hopes that one of them works. This can help the player remember this, as the next time they get an upgrade, they will be eager to try using that upgrade to see if it will open the blocked area. Another thing that Metroid Prime does well is littering optional power-ups and upgrades across the map. This is a classic Metroidvania tactic, as it makes areas still feel worth exploring even if it wasn't the right way to progress. Energy tanks, missile expansions, and beam combos are littered through this world in order to make exploration worth the player's time. Now that I've talked about pretty much everything that makes Metroid Prime's world design so great, I'm now going to move on to the things that it screws up. For starters, one of my biggest critiques of this game is how areas are connected. Or should I say not connected, as a simple elevator is what brings Samus to different areas of the game. I don't like this. It makes traversing the world a pain sometimes, as it makes it hard to remember what area connects to where. This is because the elevator rooms look almost the exact same regardless of what area you are in. This makes it hard to remember how the world is connected, and even though the map does tell you where the elevators transport you to, it can be annoying sometimes, when you have to zoom out just to figure out which elevator it is talking about. Like, does transport to Phendrana Drifts North mean that it's taking me here or here? Compare this to something like Hollow Knight, where you must physically move between areas, which makes it easy to keep the layout of the world in your head. Whilst Hollow Knight does have a transport system, I think it uses this system better, as you only have the option to use it once you have gone through quite a portion of an area. Hollow Knight also helps you remember how areas are connected, as right before you enter a new area, there will be similar themed rooms to the one in that area. This is in direct contrast to these elevators that do little to nothing to help you remember where it leads to. Another thing that Metroid Prime is critiqued for is its excessive backtracking. After recently playing through this game's sequel and seeing how well that game handles its backtracking, I really understand this complaint. Backtracking is a huge part of the Metroidvania genre, but Metroid Prime requires too much of this. This is due to not having every area connected to each other. The first 3 areas you visit are connected, and that is about as much praise as I can give to the connectivity of Metroid Prime's world. Phazon Mines is only connected to the Magma Caverns and Talon Overworld, which is a little disconnected from the rest of the map, but even worse is the Phendrana Drifts. This area is only connected to magma. This means that every single time you want to go to Phendrana, whether you want to pick up a simple missile expansion, or a whole ability, you must go through magma. And this wouldn't be too much of an issue if you only had to go to Phendrana and then back out to a different area a couple of times. But no, you have to take not 1, not 2, not even 3, but 7 trips through magma just to simply beat the game. Although one thing I will admit about this area is that it does become easier to traverse later in the game when you get upgrades like the space jump boots and the grapple beam. Despite these flaws, I still found Metroid Prime to be enjoyable. Probably one of my favorite Metroid games, and one of my favorite games in general. But why is this? Sure, the game does a lot that I like, but it also does a lot of things that I don't like. Well, I think it comes down to how the game makes me feel when I play it. Like a lot of other Metroid games, Prime has some small horror themes. You are alone exploring a planet with little to no life, and anything that is alive is trying to kill you. This planet that you explore used to be the home of a race known as the Chozo. These Chozo had to flee because of the Phazon that was corrupting the planet. Any Chozo that stayed appear in the game as ghosts corrupted by the Phazon energy. This world is dying, and Samus is the only hope of fixing that. When I play this game, I feel isolated. Other Metroid games can sometimes make me feel that sense of isolation, but the Prime trilogy does this the best in my opinion. This is due to the first-person perspective the game uses. I cannot describe to you how immersive it feels when you are looking through Samus's visor. You see it blur out when she comes in contact with an electrical enemy. You see the reflection of her face when she shoots a charged beam in front of herself. You even see her move her arm in front of the visor sometimes. Little things like this can go as far as making me feel like I am Samus. When I play a 2D Metroid, I don't get this feeling, but in the Prime trilogy it is different. It's kind of funny. I've been told that when Prime was originally revealed, people thought it was riding off the hype of Halo. Anyone who has played Prime can tell you that those people were wrong. Metroid Prime's first-person perspective wasn't put in the game just to follow the patterns of what was popular at the time. No, the perspective genuinely makes the game better, as when you play it, it feels like you are Samus. I also really like Metroid Prime's combat. First-person shooter combat is most of the time either really fast or it's really slow and more strategic. Prime is just in between this. Samus can strafe quite fast around enemies, especially with the dash ability. But this dash isn't like the typical dash that you see in faster first-person shooters. It can only be performed when you are moving right or left, and it is a short dash with very little recharge time. Dodging is a huge part of this game's combat. You can't really tank hits and find heal drops later like you can in other games. Whilst dodging, you also need to defeat enemies by finding their weak spot and exploiting this. To find the weak spot, you can either scan an enemy to have the game tell you, or you can just try everything and hope something works. Sometimes the weak spot is a specific part of the enemy, sometimes it's a specific weapon, and sometimes it's not having sunlight. You also have a variety of weapons that you can switch between that all work better in different situations. Firstly, there are the 4 main beam types. The power beam is the most basic one and the one that you start with. It does the least damage of the 4 but shoots fast. The wave beam shoots slower but does more damage because it shoots 3 projectiles at once. It technically does less damage on a charge shot, but the charge shots can stun enemies. The ice beam shoots very slow but does the most damage out of the 4 and can freeze enemies. Using a missile after freezing an enemy is a deadly combo. And then we have the plasma beam, which is really OP and is better than all of the other beams in my opinion. It does less damage than the ice beam, but it shoots much faster and does burn damage. It also does the most damage with its charge shot compared to the other 3 weapons. There are also missiles, as I mentioned with the ice beam. These missiles can be shot fast and do almost as much damage as a fully charged shot, but they consume ammo. There are also beam combos that do enormous amounts of damage, but require you to charge a shot and drain a lot of missile ammo. Finally, there are the bombs and power bombs that make combat in the Morph Ball possible. All of these different weapons make engaging combat that goes way past the simple shooting and dodging. Once Samus has gotten the Phazon suit, the player has now gotten every upgrade, but the game is far from over. With these upgrades, the player must traverse the map and find 12 Chozo artifacts. This part of Metroid Prime is often critiqued as a way to pad out the game before the player can fight the final boss. But I don't hate this. This is because exploring this world once you have gotten every upgrade is generally fun. I also think a reason for this padding was because of the technical constraints of the GameCube, which is what this game released on originally. The GameCube used smaller sized DVDs as an anti-piracy measure. This is why I think this padding is in this game. Just think of your favorite GameCube games, Super Mario Sunshine, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and the first 2 Metroid Prime games. All of these had some form of padding. Because of this technical constraint, I often don't mind padding in GameCube games. Well, that and because most of the time padding is done in a fun way like Metroid Prime. Once you get all 12 artifacts, you can fight Meta Ridley. This fight is epic as you are finally fighting the enemy that brought you to this planet in the first place. Or at least it is until he gains a shield and damage sponges for 10 minutes. It is so boring just shooting at this boss and not even seeing the health bar go down, as it does these repetitive attacks for what feels like an hour. After beating Meta Ridley, Samus can enter the Impact Crater where she explores the surrounding areas whilst fighting Metroids. Samus then finds the Metroid Prime. You are required to swap beams depending on what color the boss is whilst dodging attacks. Some projectiles even need to be shot to be avoided, and there are even little tunnels for the player to stay as a morph ball to avoid attacks. At some point, the Metroid Prime falls into a pit and Samus follows. Now the player must fight the core of the Metroid Prime. In order to do damage to the core, Samus must use the phazon energy that has been corrupting the planet the entire game. When one of these blobs of phazon energy appears, Samus can stand on it to activate Hyper Mode. In this mode, Samus can blast the core with phazon energy using the Metroid Prime's own weapon against it. The player must also switch between the combat, thermal, and X-ray visors to see the boss and fight little Metroids at the same time as the core of the Metroid Prime. Once defeated, the core starts twitching as it groups up to form a blob of phazon. This then has a last-ditch attempt to kill Samus and grabs onto her. Samus resists and is able to escape with only her phazon suit being taken away. The phazon starts to explode as Samus runs away and leaves the planet on her ship. If you 100% the game, you can get another cutscene. Here, a figure made from the phazon and Samus' phazon suit emerges. The game is finished. Despite Metroid Prime's many faults, it is still one of my favorite games of all time. This is due to its amazing but flawed world design, immersive perspective and visual effects, as well as its first-person shooter combat.